Let me start with a question. Have you ever been late to something that you were genuinely looking forward to? Not dreading, not something that was obligatory, but something that you actually wanted. It might have been a meal with a friend or a date, a phone call with somebody that matters to you, and you arrive or your call 20 minutes late. And they're fine, they say they're fine, but there's a fractional pause before they say it. And you know what's in that pause, even if they never say it out loud. And what I really can't get my head around is, not really, is that you were really looking forward to it. You thought about it, you wanted it, you just lost it somewhere between wanting it and getting there. So today we're talking about time and what it actually is when you have an AuDHD brain, and why the people who matter most to you are sometimes the ones who end up waiting. So maybe growing up you were faced with people who may not have believed you, had heard it all before, and for that I'd like to say this. This is not an episode about excuses. This is not an apology, but it is an explanation. And those are very different things. And if anything I say today resonates, if you hear yourself in any of this, or if you hear the person you love, I work with both people in that dynamic, individually and together, because understanding this is only the beginning. Knowing what to do with it is where things can actually change. But anyway, more on that later. For now, let's start with time. For most people, time is a river, a continuous flow from one moment to the next. Past behind you, future ahead, present moving steadily forward. And they can feel it. They can have an internal clock that runs in the background, ticking quietly, keeping them orientated. They know roughly whether they've been on the sofa for 20 minutes or 2 hours. Time is something that lives inside of them. But for somebody with an AuDHD brain, that river just doesn't exist. There are two states, now and not now. Now is vivid, real, present, urgent. It has texture and weight and full access to everything the brain has got. Now is happening. Not now, however, is vague. It exists somewhere. It's on the calendar. You know it's coming, but it just doesn't feel real yet. It doesn't have any weight. It doesn't generate any urgency. It is simply not yet. And this is a conversation that I just haven't really heard a lot of people talking about, but it's happening to so many of us. Yet it's also so interesting. Not now becomes suddenly, not gradually with a 10-minute warning from your internal clock. Suddenly. The appointment that was comfortably in the future is now 4 minutes away, and you're still on the sofa and you haven't even showered. I don't consider myself as a careless person, neither do I assume that you are. This isn't a carelessness that the way people who don't experience it the same way as we do, nor is it a personality flaw. This is not something that could be fixed if you just cared enough, or tried harder, or you bought a better planner. Believe me, I have bought so many planners and diaries that I could open my own store and resell all of them. This is a fundamentally different neurological relationship with time itself. The internal clock that other people have, the one that ticks quietly in the background, the one that tells them 45 minutes have passed, and a lot of AuDHD brains either don't have that, or it runs inconsistently, or it just simply doesn't translate into any action. And think about that for a second, because I know how many of you have spent years believing that this was just a character flaw, that you were either selfish, possibly even inconsiderate, or that you just didn't care enough about other people's time. And I want to say that directly, that you were not any of those things, because obviously you had a different nervous system that you didn't know about. But I do find that some of these things get a little bit complicated and a bit unfair, and very important for anybody who loves or dates somebody with AuDHD to understand. The now and the not now brain does not treat all commitments equally. So where there are professional stakes, possibly a job interview, a medical appointment, a client meeting, something with real external consequence, that the anxiety system kicks in and it compensates, and it might even overcompensate. You get the meticulous backwards planning, the night before preparation, the alarm set to leave the house at 7:43 specifically, not 7:45. And the AuDHD brain that can't do time can suddenly perform what looks like exceptional punctuality because the anxiety engine is running and anxiety generates urgency. And now here's the part that feels kind of unjust and unfair. Safe relationships don't fire the same alarm. The friend who will understand, the partner who won't leave, the family member who loves you regardless. The person whose disappointment you believe on a deep neurological level will not cost you anything permanent. Those people do not generate the same urgency signal. And that's not because that they matter any less. I mean, far from it. But it's because the brain that runs on consequence-driven urgency doesn't fire its alarm for people it trusts not to abandon it. It doesn't. That just seems like such a mixed-up reality. So you can be on time for a meeting with a stranger and genuinely, confusingly late for dinner with somebody that you love. Same person, same day, completely different experience of time, depending entirely on what the brain registers as having stakes. And I know I need to be a bit careful here because I know what this sounds like. It sounds like I'll make the effort for the people who can fire me, but people who love me unconditionally can just wait. And I understand why that reading exists, but it isn't accurate. It means that particular relationship is working. It means the trust is real. And the brain doing exactly what a brain in a secure attachment is supposed to do, stops treating that person as a threat to manage. I mean, this is good, right? Except that the urgency goes with it. Safety becomes the reason the alarm doesn't sound. And being somebody's safe person is an honor. And for an AuDHD brain, that safety sometimes shows up as lateness. And as the one who's still getting dressed when you thought that they'd already left, as the text that arrives after the agreed time saying, leaving now, it is, in the most chaotic way imaginable, it's an expression of trust. And I'm not saying that to let anybody off the hook. I'm saying it because understanding it changes the emotional charge of that conversation. It becomes less about, do you even care about me? And becomes more about how do we build structure that actually works. Let me paint you a picture. It's 10 p.m. and there is an appointment tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's not optional and I can't reschedule. It's the kind where being late isn't an option and the planning has already started. Not tomorrow morning, but now, tonight. Because doing it tomorrow morning is way too dangerous. Tomorrow morning, there will be variables. There will be a brain that hasn't warmed up yet. There will be too little time and too many decisions and no guarantee that any of them will cohere. So tonight, instead, I start at the end and work backwards. Need to be there by 9:45. Coat off, settled, parking is 10 minutes, walk from the car about 7, find the right door 5, leave the house at, is there fuel? Almost certainly not. Got to factor that in. Check the weather. Is there any ice? Check. Outfit sorted tonight, or it becomes a variable in the morning. Hair. Please let it not be a wash day. Assess now so that it's not a decision at 6 a.m. Bag. pack it now. Chargers, are they charged? Plug them in. Otherwise, I will not do them. And what time does all of that mean getting up? So I'll work it out, write it down, set the alarm. And only then is there any possibility of sleep. And from the outside, this looks like, I'm going through some kind of anxiety. And I guess it is partially, but it is also the most functional thing available. The backward plan at 10 p.m. is the infrastructure that makes tomorrow even possible. It is the person with no internal clock building one from the outside in, the only way that they know how. And if you share a life with somebody who does this, here is what I'd like you to know. Don't tell them to just go to sleep and sort it out later. Sleep is not available until the plan is complete. The brain that tries to sleep without the sequence will not sleep. It will plan anyway, in the dark, without the information it needs, producing anxiety instead of answers. And if you can take one variable off the list, I'll sort the dog out in the morning. I've checked that there's fuel, so that's, absolutely worth more than you probably realize. One confirmed variable, one closed loop, that's not nothing. And that's the difference between a night of incomplete calculations and an hour and a half of actual sleep. Different scene now. A friend, somebody you actually wanted to see. They said 3 p.m, it's now 1 p.m, and there is plenty of time. Plenty. Enough time to put a wash on, enough time to pop to the shops, enough time to quickly sort that drawer that has been quietly haunting you for 3 weeks. And then, it's now 2:30, it's an hour's drive, and you haven't showered, and the wash is in the machine. The drawer is half sorted with its entire contents spread all over the kitchen floor. And the panic has arrived exactly on time, even if nothing else has. And the question, the one that comes later from the friend or from you in the car to yourself, is how? You were so excited about this. You said you were really looking forward to it. How is it 2:30 and you haven't even showered? Washing made sense, the shopping was perfectly logical, the drawer was genuinely bothering you. Each individual decision was reasonable. The problem is that now and not now, 3 p.m, before anybody noticed that it was even hungry. And underneath the logistics, underneath the time blindness, is a relational truth that is worth naming. The people we are late for are often the people we may feel safest disappointing. Not in a calculated way, not consciously, because that would be mean. But the nervous system that has learnt correctly that this friend won't actually leave, that this partner will still be there, and that this relationship is secure. That nervous system doesn't fire the same alarm in the same way. And safety is not the same as caring. Safety is trust. Safety is the relationship doing its job. Now, for the friend or for the partner or the person who's waiting, being somebody's safe person is the reason you're sometimes the one that they are late for. You are not the last priority. You are, in a very specific neurological sense, the person that they just don't have to manage their anxiety around. And that is a form of intimacy, even when it is deeply inconvenient. But what helps? An alarm that says, leave the house, not appointment time, a structure the night before, even just a text saying, getting ready now. A partner or friend who says the night before, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow, I'll be ready at 2, rather than a message at 3:15 that just says, where are you? And the first is it's like a warm anchor. The second is like a reactive rupture. And they produce very different nervous system responses. And I think that this one really surprises people. So there's an appointment at 2 p.m. It's relatively important. It's been in the calendar for 2 weeks at least. It's currently 7 a.m. there are about 7 hours, and the whole day is not available. The 2 p.m. is already here in the sense that it was already occupying the cognitive foreground. If it sits on the horizon of every hour between now and then, quietly consuming available attention. And starting something meaningful feels quite impossible, because what if it runs over? What if getting ready takes longer? What if there's traffic? And the sofa is where the morning goes. Nothing gets done, not because there's, no intention, but because the 2 p.m. has eaten the day from the inside out. And this is called waiting mode. And it may look like laziness for the person looking in, but it really isn't. It's just a brain that has locked onto an upcoming event and cannot unlock until that event has happened. Now, in relationships, this matters because it looks from the outside like wasted time, like avoidance, like the person somehow manages to do nothing for 6 hours and then be completely stressed out about being ready. But what's actually happening is that the brain has allocated its resource to the event and cannot simultaneously run a parallel task. Two sequences cannot run at once. And when one of them has a fixed, immovable endpoint, and if you are scheduling things with or for somebody who has AuDHD, wherever possible, put the appointments at the edges of the day. A 9 a.m. appointment costs a morning. A 2 or a 3 p.m. appointment costs a whole blooming day. Now, that's not a small difference in somebody's quality of life, but it's worth knowing. Oh, and if this gets cancelled, that's a whole different level, and I'll come to that a little bit later. Now, I'm going to tell you something that happened to me because I think it illustrates this more honestly than any explanation could. So recently, I had a medical appointment, something that I needed, and I did everything right. Well, almost everything. I called to make the appointment. I wrote it down, and both of those things happened, so far, so good. Now, what I didn't do was write it somewhere permanent. It went on a piece of paper. A piece of paper that later went in the bin, unread, unchecked, because the act of writing it down had already registered in my brain as handled, done, no further action required. And I was slightly distracted when I wrote it, which meant that the information never fully landed in the first place. And it went from spoken to written without ever passing through properly processed. And it existed on a surface that I would throw away, recorded by a brain that was already half somewhere else. And okay, I also assumed, reasonably, I thought that I would get a reminder the day before. I offloaded the responsibility for remembering onto a system I hadn't even confirmed existed. And that reminder became real in my mind before it was real in the world. And then somehow, and this is genuinely slightly mysterious to me, I remembered the appointment the night before, which felt like a miracle. I woke up the next morning knowing I had somewhere to be. So I did exactly what I felt was the right thing to do. I thought, right, I'm going to call ahead early so I don't miss it. And in that moment, I felt something I want to be honest about. I felt a flicker of pride. I had remembered, I was taking action. I was in that moment on top of it. In other words, I was adulting. Anyway, I called at 9:35. I asked what time my appointment was, and the receptionist said, really, really friendly, she said 9:30. And I said, great. I looked at my watch and then, oh, that was 5 minutes ago. I'm not going to make it. Now, the pride and the crashed arrived about 4 seconds of each other. And the thing that made it hurt more than a straightforward missed appointment was that I had been so close. I hadn't forgotten entirely. I had remembered. I'd acted and I'd done it. I'd done the thing. And it still wasn't enough because the chain of small, invisible, entirely reasonable decisions made weeks earlier had already determined the outcome. A piece of paper in the bin, the distraction whilst writing it, the assumed reminder. None of those things felt like mistakes at that time, and none of them had a warning sign either. They were just, is how it went. And I called myself an idiot, which was, unfair, but I understand why I did it. And that feeling, that specific close but not close enough feeling, stayed with me for the rest of the day. In fact, I still, carry it with me now. And it wasn't just the missed appointment. The rug pulled at the exact moment that I thought I was standing firmly on it. That is what now and not now actually looks like from the inside. It's not carelessness or indifference. A chain of perfectly reasonable decisions and one watch checked 15 minutes too late. And I had to wait 2 more weeks for the next available appointment. Yep. Infuriating, as I really needed this appointment, and it felt really disappointing that I had, in fact, let myself down. And I tell you that not to perform self-deprecation. I tell you that because it is such a precise illustration of what now and not now actually looks like in practice. I had the instinct, I made the call, I was technically prepared, and still, somehow, 9:30 was not now until 9:35. The gap between knowing and doing, between intention and action, between the plan and the moment, that gap is not a moral failing, although it, does feel like it. It is a feature of a brain that experiences time differently. And yeah, it is extraordinarily difficult to explain to somebody who has a working internal clock, because to them, 9:30 was real at 9:15. And to me, it became real at 9:35. This one is for the people who love somebody with AuDHD and are listening to understand. Now, you might think that giving more time is helpful, and that why we don't leave 30 minutes later is a kindness, a relief, and a gift of buffer. And sometimes, yeah, it is. But sometimes it creates a problem that didn't exist before. And here is what might happen when you add an unexpected 30 minutes to a plan that was already running. There is now a gap, and those gaps don't stay empty. The brain that finds unstructured waiting genuinely uncomfortable, and a lot of AuDHD brains do, and will need to fill the gap with something. Of course it will, because sitting still in pre-departure activated time is not a comfortable option. It is a necessity to fill the time with something. And then the 30 minutes is up and the something isn't quite finished. And leaving means abandonment. An abandonment of an open sequence costs more than the 30 minutes ever gave back. Now, if you need to move a leaving time and you can offer a container for the gap, a specific episode to watch or a task with a clear end, now that can help. An open 30 minutes attached to nothing is an invitation for a sequence that won't close in time. Now, if you can, leave at the same time you originally planned and, get a coffee when you arrive. That sequence then stays intact, the gap disappears, and nobody has to negotiate a new leaving time with a brain that was already running. Now, the other direction is much harder. Now, when you tell somebody with an AuDHD brain that you need to leave 10 minutes earlier than planned, or moved anything in a sequence that was already running, the instinct of the person who loves them is often to help. to assist with that triage, to ask what they can take off the list. And I understand that instinct completely. It comes from a place of care, but here is what is actually happening inside the brain in that moment. Now, the normal already spaghetti junction of thoughts, which is, quite complex in itself, already running multiple things simultaneously, has suddenly accelerated totally erratically. And because everything is moving too fast, it becomes almost impossible to think clearly. The thoughts are going faster than you can catch them. Now, if you imagine being on a dark highway, a super busy one, roads are joining, leaving, going over, going under, to the left, to the right, and you just see headlights zooming past at full speed at and from every direction, while you are actually trying to cross the road on foot, slowly. That's the internal experience of a change plan hitting a brain that was already in sequence. And in that state, any external input, however well meant, is another set of headlights, another road joining the junction. It doesn't help. It adds to what needs to be processed at the exact moment. Processing has almost become impossible. So this is what could actually help. Nothing. For a moment, please do nothing. Let the brain catch up with itself. Don't ask questions. Don't offer to take things off the list, because removing something from a carefully constructed sequence doesn't feel like a relief. It feels like a tear in the fabric of something that was load bearing. And don't rush. Don't reassure with, oh, it'll be fine, because that is not information that the brain can use right now. Just step back. Let the processing happen. Wait until we're in the car and the sequence has either completed or compressed itself. And that is when the breathing will return, and that is when conversation is possible. Now, if you interfere before that point, you are not helping. You are actually an obstacle in a junction that is already moving way too fast. And I cannot guarantee that I will be calm about that. And it's not because I don't appreciate the intention, because the intention, however kind, is landing as more chaos on top of chaos. Now, here is something that is completely confusing. If you flip that scenario and there is a genuine emergency, if something happens that means that we have to leave right now, no warning, no sequence, no backwards plan, watch what happens. It is still super fast. Everything is still moving at the same speed, but something shifts. The headlights that were flying at you from every direction suddenly form a sequence. It's almost like a pattern. And even though nothing has slowed down, it appears as if it has, because suddenly you can read it. You can make complete sense of everything. What was chaos becomes information, and that information arrives in the right order, and you know exactly what you need to do with it. Everything that you need is gathered. Every eventuality is considered. The thinking is clear and organized and feels so fast in the way, from the outside, it's almost implausible. So how is that possible? It's the same brain, same junction, same speed, but a real emergency registers as a real consequence. And when the urgency engine fires completely, it doesn't produce chaos, it produces clarity. Anyway, last scenario, possibly the most counterintuitive. The appointment that is cancelled. At 11 a.m., the 3 p.m., the one that the whole day was hanging from, is no longer happening. Now, to some, this might feel like a relief. Free afternoon, unexpected free time has been returned. And for a lot of AuDHD brains, it doesn't. The appointment wasn't just logistics. It was a structure that the whole day was hanging from. And the preparation for it, the outfit chosen the night before, the mental rehearsal of how to show up, the quiet calibration of which version of of yourself to bring to that room, all of that was specific. All of it was built for a 3 p.m. that now no longer exists. And now there is just time. Formless, unstructured, unscheduled time and the wall. And I want to describe what this wall actually feels like from the inside, because I don't think that it gets described honestly very often. It feels like being stuck, genuinely stuck. It's not unmotivated, not choosing to sit there, but it's just stuck. Like the body has forgotten how to function. Like it's in a state of disbelief that it no longer needs to go anywhere. Everything that was joined onto that appointment, the sequence, the preparation, the version of yourself that was being assembled, it all fitted together around that one fixed point. Now that fixed point is gone, and simply rearranging is not a part of the curriculum. It's like being handed instructions in a foreign language that you've never once heard spoken. And the words are all there, you can see them, but they make no sense. And coming back from that state, it does take a bit of time, real time. And the time it takes needs to be respected and not rushed. There is nothing to fix. There is no shortcut through it. The only thing that works is being allowed to come back to yourself at a pace that your system needs. And here is what I would like people watching this to hear. The partners, the friends, the housemates who are on the other side of it, watching somebody that they love apparently doing nothing on the sofa. It is just as uncomfortable to be in that body as it is to witness it. Possibly more so, because the person on the sofa is not resting. They are mid-process. They are somewhere between where they were going and where they are now. And the route back isn't signposted. So please don't add any more pressure, even pressure that doesn't feel like pressure to you. A gentle suggestion, a reminder of other things that could be done, a well-meaning observation that the afternoon is slipping away. This lands as pressure on a system that is already working as hard as it can just to find its way back. Just wait, just watch. And when you can see them coming back to themselves, and it's not when you think they should be, but when you can actually see it, then maybe you can offer something light. Maybe a walk, just a simple walk. One small thing that has no stakes attached to it, and an on-ramp, not a schedule. And there will be times when this doesn't land as hard. And if the cancellation was suspected, if there was some warning, some preparation for the possibility, it can be so much easier to process. The system had a partial contingency. It isn't always this total, but when it is total, when it arrives without warning, know that what you're witnessing isn't a choice and it's not a performance. This is a nervous system doing the only thing available to do. Just let it complete. That's all. Just let it complete. And I want to spend some time on the other side of this, because everything I've described today, the now and the not now brain, the waiting mode, the plan that breaks when you move it 10 minutes, all of it has been from the inside, from the experience of the person who is late or stuck or staring at the wall. But there is someone else in every step of these scenarios, and their experience is real too. And it deserves more than just a footnote. So when somebody is late for you, genuinely, repeatedly, even lovingly late, and you don't yet have the framework to understand why, your nervous system fills the gap with the most available explanation. The most available explanation is usually, I don't matter enough. They didn't try hard enough. I am not worth the effort of leaving on time. And that's not a dramatic response. That's, it is a human one. And we are wired to make meaning out of other people's behavior, and lateness is legible. It reads as prioritization. It reads as a statement about where you sit in somebody else's hierarchy, even when it isn't, even when it's neurology and not hierarchy at all. And underneath that assumption sits something even more pervasive, a cultural script so common it barely even gets questioned, that the person who is late simply doesn't care enough, doesn't value the other person's time, made a choice, however unconsciously, to prioritize something else. And that script is everywhere, and it does real damage to relationships that could survive if it were placed, or if it were replaced with something more accurate. And this is where that becomes, particularly layered, because the very same mechanisms that we've been talking about all episode, the ones that make someone with AuDHD brain late, the ones that make a changed plan so destabilizing, those same mechanisms are activated when somebody is late for you. So when somebody is late and you don't know how late, something specific can happen. It isn't just frustration, but it can be a freeze too, because every decision you might make in the meantime depends on a piece of information that you just don't have. How long? Is it 5 minutes, 20? Are they nearly here, or are they still at home? And without that number, without a clear estimate, without regular updates that tell you where things stand, you can't decide anything. And you can't settle into something, because you might need to move at any moment. And you can't leave, because what if they arrive and you're not there? You can't fully stay, because staying feels passive and uncomfortable, and the not knowing is sitting on your chest. Okay, so if you're at home, you might end up on the sofa, you might end up doing a bit of doom scrolling on your phone, and it, not even because you particularly want to, but because it's the only thing that's available to a brain that can't commit to anything else while the gap is open and unquantified. And if you're waiting outside, somewhere public, standing somewhere that isn't quite yours to stand in indefinitely, that's worse. That's filled with an awkwardness to being a person visibly waiting with no information. You need to stay, but staying with no end point is its own particular discomfort. And the options that might help, like go and sit in a coffee shop, wait by the car, find somewhere more comfortable, all of them require knowing. Is it 10 minutes or 30? Because 10 minutes means stay put. 30 minutes means go and sit somewhere. Not knowing means none of those choices are available. The freeze holds. And underneath that freeze is something else. That time is being lost, because this wasn't just any occasion. This was something looked forward to, something that already felt precious, maybe already time capped, already mapped out in the mind as something worth having. And the lateness is eating into it. Every minute without an update is a minute taken from something that was already with a limit. And that's not nothing. That lands as a loss, real loss, before the person has even arrived. A simple update changes everything. It doesn't need an apology. It just needs an estimate. 10 minutes away. I'm stuck in traffic, probably 20 minutes. Even though I'm not sure yet, I'll keep you posted. That is information. However imperfect, it opens the freeze. It gives the waiting brain something to work with. A number, a choice, a way back into the world while it waits. Now, there's something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD. You may have heard of it, and it's worth noting or understanding, not just as a concept, but as a physical reality, because, that's what it is, physical. When somebody is late, maybe once, maybe it happens regularly, maybe it's something that matters particularly to you on this specific occasion, and it gets met with indifference. There's no explanation, no acknowledgement, no sense that it registered as something worth addressing, let alone worth changing. In that moment, something happens that goes well beyond frustration, and it feels like a rejection, a complete one, like you are insignificant, like the things that you value, the things that matter most, are nothing. And that feeling doesn't arrive as a thought, it arrives as a sensation, a stab, a real physical pain in the body that is not metaphorical and not dramatic, and it's not chosen. And here's what makes it particularly relentless. For those of us with high empathy, with finely tuned nervous systems, with a lifetime of reading rooms, we don't always need somebody to tell us we're being treated with indifference. We feel it way before it's confirmed. We can read it in the body language. We can hear it in your tone. We can catch it in the thing that wasn't even said, the acknowledgement that didn't actually come. The moment that passed without the recognition that we needed. And then we analyse. We go back over it. We look for the alternative explanation, the charitable reading, the evidence that we got it wrong over and over again. And sometimes we find it and sometimes we don't. And when we don't, when the analysis keeps returning the same verdict, the pain doesn't stay as pain. It calcifies into something quieter and more damaging, a story about our own significance, about what we are worth to the people we love, about whether our values, our needs, our experience of time and disappointment are being kept waiting, whether any of that actually matters to anybody. That is what untreated, unexplained, unacknowledged lateness can do over time to somebody who has RSD. It's not the lateness itself, but it's the silence around it. And perhaps the most quietly painful version of this, for those of you who recognize yourself in both sides of this episode, is knowing that you are sometimes the person who is late. Knowing the neurology, understanding intellectually that a lateness is not a statement about how much somebody is valued, and still feeling the full force of RSD when somebody is late for you. The understanding doesn't cancel out the feeling. It just means you're carrying both at once. God, it's all so complicated. And I say that not as a disclaimer, but as a genuine acknowledgement that this is genuinely complicated. The same brain that struggles to be on time, struggles to wait for somebody who isn't. The same mechanisms that explain your lateness to others are the ones that make their lateness to you so hard to sit with. And there is no clean side to this to stand on. And, which is why the conversation matters so much more than the punctuality. Now, here is something I want to be honest about, speaking personally now. If I know that my lateness is affecting somebody's emotional well-being, if I understand that the person waiting is uncomfortable, is hurting, is sitting with the feeling of being unimportant, that really lands for me as a consequence. A real one, not a professional consequence, not something with external stakes, but something that matters in a way that goes straight to the core of how I want to show up for people. I do not want to be the reason somebody feels that way. The thought that my actions, or what looks like from the outside like a lack of action, could make somebody that I care about feel dismissed or unvalued, that really hurts. And that hurt is its own urgency signal, a different one to the professional alarm, but no less real. Which means for somebody with AuDHD people, anyway, for AuDHD people, the thing that helps most isn't a system or a structure or a better alarm, it's knowing. Knowing that somebody on the other side is genuinely affected. And, not as a guilt trip. Guilt and shame shut the executive function down. They don't help. But as honest information, as the kind of clarity that that the consequence-driven brain can actually work with. Tell me that it matters to you, not in anger, not after the fact, but as a genuine piece of information shared between two people who are trying to understand each other. Now that is something I can receive. That is something that has a chance of changing what happens next. And for some of us, there is something else underneath that, a trauma layer. The fear of being the cause of somebody else's distress isn't new. It has roots. It connects to older experiences where other people's emotional states carries real weight, real consequence, and sometimes real danger. And the hypervigilance around whether somebody is hurt because of you didn't arrive from nowhere. And when it resurfaces here in something as ordinary as a change plan or a late arrival, it's just not an overreaction. It's the nervous system doing what it learned to do in circumstances that no longer require it, but just hasn't been told yet. And, there's still something else that is worth naming here, because for many people with AuDHD, and particularly for those who also carry the trauma history, empathy can also run high, sometimes extraordinarily high, and not universally, because there are situations where it's less available, where the cognitive load is too great or the sensory environment too demanding. But in close relationships with people who matter, the capacity to feel what somebody else is feeling, not just understand it intellectually, but feel it in the body, often before it's been spoken, that capacity can be profound. Which means the experience of being late isn't happening in emotional isolation. The moment you register that somebody is affected, you are affected too. And you don't need to be told. You already know. You felt the shift before they even had to say a word. And that knowing, that constant, finely tuned awareness of other people's emotional states didn't arrive from nowhere. And it might be partially neurological, part of how an AuDHD nervous system is wired to process the social world. And it may be partly learnt, developed early in circumstances where reading the room wasn't a social nicety, but a necessary skill, where knowing how somebody was feeling before they showed it mattered in ways that went way beyond ordinary social comfort. I mean, however it arrived, it means that the person who struggles most with time is often also the person who most acutely aware of their lateness and how other people respond to it, and carrying that simultaneously, and feeling that weight of somebody else. It can be particularly heavy, and it needs to be named as such. Now, if you're the person who waits, whether you're neurotypical or AuDHD with RSD or somewhere else on that spectrum entirely, here's what I would like to offer you. Your feelings about being kept waiting are legitimate. You do not have to erase them in the name of understanding. Understanding is not the same as it being fine. Understanding is what makes it possible to be honest about the fact that it isn't always fine, without it becoming evidence of how little you are loved. And if you are the person who is late, who recognizes themselves in everything that I've described today, part of what understanding your own neurology gives you is the ability to name it. Now, it's not as an excuse deployed after the fact, but as a conversation had before. This is how my brain works. This is what helps. This is what I'm working on. And that conversation had with care and consistency changes what lateness means. It stops being a mystery. It stops being interpretable as indifference. It becomes something that you are navigating together. And that is the difference between AuDHD as something that happens to a relationship and AuDHD as something a relationship can learn to hold. And if you've been listening to this episode and something landed, if you've recognized yourself or recognized the person that you love, or finally felt like somebody has described something that you've been living but never had the words for. And I want you to know that this understanding doesn't have to stop here. This work, this kind of clarity we've been talking about today, is available to both people in the dynamic. Not just the person with AuDHD trying to understand how they show up, and not just the partner beside them trying to understand without fear of getting it wrong. For both, because this kind of understanding doesn't only belong to one side of the relationship, it belongs to both. And what becomes possible when both people have access to it, real, deep, specific understanding of how they think, how they show up, how the person they love experiences the world, is the ability to meet each other there. And without the constant fear of saying the wrong thing, without being misread, without the exhausting feeling of failing each other, without knowing why. And people who do this work leave feeling more legible to themselves and to their partner, calmer, less like something is fundamentally wrong with them, and more like that they finally have a map. A relationship that felt confusing and exhausting starts to feel navigatable, sometimes even easy. And that's not a small thing, but that is the thing. And if you're ready to find out what that could look like for you, and there are two ways that you can reach out right now. You can book a call with me and we'll talk and I'll listen, and together we can work out what this could look like for your specific situation. Or if a call feels like a little bit too much right now, if your nervous system needs a softer entry point, you can still send a voice note instead. Just tell me what's going on. Tell me what brought you here, and I'll listen and I'll respond personally. Both options are in the show notes. Right now, you don't have to have it all figured out before you reach out. You just have to take one small step of making contact, and the clarity starts there. And everything that I've described today has a neurological explanation. The backwards plan at 10 p.m. The waiting mode at, the 8, the morning, the gap that filled itself. The cancelled appointment that still managed to cost the whole day. And all of it is wiring, the now and the not now brain. The missing internal clock, the nervous system that needs structure the way other people need air and falls apart quietly when structure disappears. But underneath the neurology, for a lot of people, there is something else. A lifetime of being told that they are unreliable, inconsiderate, that their relationship with time is a moral failing, the shame of the late arrival, the cancelled appointment, the day wasted, the person that they kept waiting. Shame and executive function are incompatible. You cannot think clearly and feel terrible about yourself at the same time. The backwards plan the night before is not just planning. For a lot of people, it is evidence compiled before dawn that they are trying. They are not what the voice in their heads has always said that they are. And if you are the person with the AuDHD brain, you are not unreliable. You are just differently wired in ways that need different structures, not better character. And if you love somebody with an AuDHD brain, you are not unimportant because you're sometimes the one that they're late for. You are safe, and in a nervous system that has often experienced the world as unpredictable and high stakes, safe is not nothing. Safe is everything. So be gentle with the waiting, be gentle with the wall. Both are carrying more than they appear to be. And I'll see you next time. Until next spiral.